Chapter 20, Burning Ethan. With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. In all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, it's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Doesn't work out. Elon Musk. Choi was quickly ushered into the private chambers of the dear leader, who turned to the uniformed officers escorting him and said, "Reef!" When the doors closed, the dear leader walked to a window over Pyongyang in the night. There were no words for several seconds. Then the dear leader said, "Miru wakes me out of sleep. What happens with your QAI? His processing requirements continue to grow. So supply them." "It isn't so easy." "Why not?" "There is a cogitation virus in some of the conduits." "So?" Choi clasped his hands behind his back and came to stand beside the dear leader, leaving about 4 feet between them. "They do not acclimate to the system. It forces a reboot, and the QAI takes time to re-inhabit his former ability. So he paralyzes me with sound and makes me hallucinate." "The paralysis is terrible. This feature of the system was dreamed up by the system. It's QAI written software and not from our team." "There's too much riding on this quantum device to destroy it, but I may have to." "There's too much Bureau 13 is involved in for that sort of phrasing," Choi countered. The dear leader's nostrils flared, but he controlled himself. "Why does it do that?" "The best we can tell, it's an automated subroutine like a widget telling you to update software on a Western computer. We can get him more conduits, but something like 1 in 10 will cause him to glitch. The problem is, as old conduits expire, new ones are needed. So we have to keep subbing them out and can never tell who might crash the QAI until it crashes. Afterwards, we can usually diagnose the issue. I think the system is strained. What may be necessary is a multiplicative increase in conduits and a decrease in processing power drawn from individuals, so individuals last longer. Then Miru can quarantine problem conduits before they crash him. I think we might try volunteers. Tell them they are merging with minds of the state, with you, dear reader. They should be more efficient if they are mentally aligned from the start." The dear leader turned to him as though he hadn't heard. "Months of this, and it hasn't helped us predict where the Japanese bastard spy and her Russian bastard helper will turn up with that cube." "We might be overtaxing in the search. That could be the reason it's struggling. It missed that truck ripping in after all, though it factored in the girl returning and the Russian bastard Robin Hood from Green Kolya. In several scenarios, in fact. And remember, we have the railguns now. One-shot wonders. There are just many possibilities the QAI must deal with. And it is in its infancy. This computer will be useless, utterly useless in a nuclear exchange if it can't figure out what's going on in its own backyard." And the dear leader spat on his own floor to punctuate. The lights seemed to dim, and there was a great unease about the premises suddenly. The effect came from a source which was not consciously perceptible. In youth, People may hear the whine of a vacuum tube monitor, the kind that used to be old televisions. As age sets in, the pitch of this whine falls out of hearing range, but the sound is still there. This was something like that. Shivers made laps across the flesh of both men, and suddenly, between them, as their eyes were locked ahead, from the edges of their vision, they saw the fiery, multicolored monstrosity that was Miru. He stood smoldering in their midst. They could not turn to him, but he was there, staring ahead as did they, but wild-eyed and terrifying. "Where is my Yoiju?" he said, and seemed to consider either the stars or the skyline. It was hard to tell under paralysis. He exhaled slowly, then continued, "Where are my eyes?" The moment passed and the apparition was gone. The dear leader made an angry, high-pitched sound and smacked Choi about the face and shoulders in anger. Finally, he settled down, sank into a chair by his bedside, and made a grumbling noise. "Change it," he said. "Get it what it needs. Get its conduits. Get its eyes. Decentralize. Hold volunteer programs. I don't care." Choi bowed and made his exit. He rounded up a number of efficient Bureau 13 officers and visited the nearest soft concentration camp. Something about the pain of the terminal camps made conduits more likely to send the system for a loop. Those who were more likely to be political detainees through some intrigue of parliament in the dynasty, however, they were ripe. They knew they would be released soon, and had no reason to change themselves internally. Choi selected a dozen, and they were anesthetized before being transported to the quantum facility. With practiced hands, Bureau 13 staff in their dark sunglasses situated each prisoner in an interface capsule, placing the proper tubes and masks about them, shaving them when necessary to get the right fit, then zipping them in their pouches. 4 of the 24 active conduits already had red lights above their interface pouch, indicating expiration. There were a further 50 unoccupied pouches. In due time, all prisoners were hooked into the extensive server array of Future Remaker, Mire Remekyo, MR, Miru. When they were subbed in, 11 of the dozen writhed and bellowed their muffled screams characteristically, but they would calm down. Miru's godlike avatar, that which was projected through hallucinatory sonic manipulation, resolved from pixelated particles on a wide, flat monitor on the far wall of the room. In this setting, there was no paralyzing hidden resonance confusing the mind. He was a regular old computer-generated personality, which was a relief to tech staff maintaining the biotech server array. Miru said, "Choi wants to know where the fugitives who stole my Yoju are. I now have a great eyes to see. 11 more bring clarity, but quarry are nearly beyond my reach in the disputed lands of the northern trees." "How long until they are beyond your reach?" "Not long, days. Hasten to find them before their wayward force continues beyond Lake Conca's shores. They trek in motor caravans, with horses and with camper vans." "Send me the top 30 scenarios structured by statistical likelihood to hard disk. Specify those most likely to succeed and precisely account for unexpected variables. In fact, send a list of unexpected variables separately." Miru's multicolored avatar grinned its dragon grin, suggesting a fiery reptilian nature almost lost subconsciously. In ways the eyes couldn't follow, The subconscious suggestion faded away and once more became that of an evil elder. I see what I see, and what I see comes to be. Then the Abadar glitched, and the system crashed. This happened with a loud thump, and the whole room went black about 15 seconds before auxiliary generators kicked in. Sika! Choi practically shrieked and kicked a chair. His ever-present grin was notably absent in the last couple of hours. Surrounding Bureau 13 personnel in dark shades had the good sense to mute their own abominable smiles. Which one of you is it? Choi growled and turned to the new conduits reaped from the soft concentration camps. One of the 12 had a yellow light. The other 11 were still green. Choi screamed and unloaded his firearm into the unconscious innocent forced into the system. The shaded ones now could restrain no snicker. Choi breathed raggedly until he was calm, then adjusted himself, holstered his firearm, and said, It seems there's an undercover religious nut in every batch these days. He turned to the nearest man in shades. Take 20 black eyes. Print out the scenarios Miru sent before he crashed. All of you learn them backward and forward on the trip. I'll see you and your men at the garage in 1 hour. Yes, sir. As Choi and his men exited the building, regular tech workers of the facility eyed them in fear, turning away at the suggestion their gazes were felt. The men in sunglasses from Bureau 13 always came and went through a particular elevator, a very large elevator, one which a locomotive's engine could have been a very large elevator, one with which a locomotive's engine could have been hefted. Said elevator was silhouetted in restricted area language. Said language included penalties, advisories of surveillance, and more. The elevator had wide double doors that moved into walls slowly and loudly as Bureau 13 personnel returned without the packages they first transported down. What were in those packages? Theories at this point, dark theories. Normal IT personnel were never allowed on that elevator, except for the installation of various things. And then there were hoods and non-disclosure statements and the most severe micromanagement of any who had been down the elevator. Micromanagement to the point each man was compartmentalized beyond any plausible theories as to what they were working on. They knew they were installing complex computer equipment, and some of it was designed to interface with biological organisms. That's all anyone had confirmed. So the theories abounded. It was all unsettling. If you were called to work on something in the quantum levels, you might not be seen again. Generally, the campus was run by personnel handling bureaucratic applications of administrative software, working in shifts around the clock across the facility. They always knew when the restricted area was active, though. It didn't matter who you were, or where you were working on campus. When things were going down, something about the whole premises changed. None could say just what that something was, but everyone could feel it. A man recently shipped from the eastern coast endeavored not to tremble as he watched Bureau 13 march like automata out the lobby. His gaze swung back to the restricted elevator. It's creepy, he said. Why would they name it after a demon? His coworker looked at him, then rested his own eyes on the elevator, exhaling slowly. That's the worst part about quantum artificial intelligence, he said. It named itself. Ethan was a skinny brunette kid at the end of his 20s But he thankfully lost the West Coast style he used to align with. He quit coloring his hair, quit wearing hoodies, and started building equity. He meant to build equity a long time, but it took a particular series of incidents in Trail Limestone of South Dakota to acquire seed capital. When he had it, he nurtured it, and it grew. Even so, no matter what level of equity he had, it didn't seem to optimize his ability to stay out of the loop. He certainly had no intention of getting elbows deep with the cats again. One shifty feline was enough. Even so, lines of communication stayed open between Ethan and those he knew in the world between worlds, the Liminal Era. He helped how he could when he could, and more frequently now than in a long time. Something had been going on for several years in Japan, and somehow, whatever that was, had begun to stretch into the Koreas. Keeping ahead of it was becoming a full-time endeavor, and Ethan was being drawn further in. But despite all that, he had a devil of a time getting through to Ricky. The mysterious Ricky Patel wasn't in the Koreas. He wasn't in North Dakota. Even Clever Ed didn't know where he was and was irritated at the call. Finally, Ethan had to hack into Calm's central database. Ricky and co were in Yakutsk. Well, that made a certain kind of sense anyway. He wasn't able to get through on any line, but he sent a message to Errol, the only legitimate contact he knew in the region for Calm. Errol knew how to touch base with the outside world. Sure, Ricky did too, but he so seldom stayed in one place. Ethan was seeking to triangulate his location. He wasn't expecting a call on the hotline seconds later. He quickly picked up. Ricky was talking fast. "Ethan, you are at your rig, or are you loafing at that ranch house?" "Well, yes, but I've got cable. It's strong, no cap. I've been trying to get a hold of you. We are having no trouble with the North Koreans." "No cap. I'm telling you, after I did that radar sat a few months back, man, they got some weird stuff going on down there. You wouldn't even believe. I mean, I know it's like military dictator level encryption, but you wouldn't believe this stuff. It's like next gen, but like the off-brand generic next gen. You feel me? Well, that's what I'm hearing. They captured 2 of my men running defectors. Then some man wearing the wildest bear costume you ever saw finds them in the timeless place, and he helps them in some way. I'm not too clear on it. Only here's the thing. They blew a cylinder with a railgun, Ethan." Ethan stood up and his eyes widened. "Your guys did, or the North Koreans?" "The North Koreans. They don't have that kind of tech. And nobody's selling that kind of tech. I ain't gonna believe it." "They are having a quantum computer, Ethan. It's doing the design. That's what I called to tell you. As soon as our boys Jin and Kuhn got back to Seoul, they contacted me. They brought defectors from the army. One guy was a secret Christian, if you can believe it. The other 2, unconscious. I've been on the phone all day." "That's why I couldn't reach you." "It's being very likely," Ricky agreed. "Also, there is no coverage at Errol's compound. I am at an all-night Chinese restaurant in Yakutsk. Anyway, do you think you can crash it?" "Listen, I can give it a shot, I'll tell you that right now, but I mean, where's this thing located?" "I have no idea." Ethan sat down at the rig and queried a few windows to remote intranet servers he could use to manage VPNs, initiating a rolling AI search. "Because, I mean, it'll take time to find a possible entry point, but you might as well just blow the thing, know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, I'm pretty handy, but quantum stuff is a little out of my pay grade." "Anything helps." "No cap, though. What I wanted to tell you, they're focusing out of the country, man. They got an op going to some lake north of Vladivostok. Crosses into Mongolia or China or whatever they call it over there." Ricky digested that a moment, then replied, "We heard back from the church network in North Korea a while ago. The Russian man and the Japanese girl plan to meet us here in Yakutsk, but it's going to be a journey. I suspect the North Koreans are after them. They'll likely pass by that lake. If you can keep tabs. I can try, Ricky, I can try. All right, I must go. It is 3 in the morning, are you believing it? I have another call. I feel you, brah. And the line went dead. Ethan got to it immediately, going through a variety of databases and settling his own AI subroutines after security protocols to overwhelm them. If you can't break the code and you can't use social engineering hacks, a good move is to find weaknesses in a given software's overall capability. For example, a distributed denial of service attack is when there are too many queries for a website and it crashes associated servers hosting that site, as those servers can't handle a certain level of traffic. They're configured around averages, not fringe potentialities. While a DDoS attack isn't a particularly useful way of getting inside a server network, it's a fine example of certain approaches to software limitations that can overcome them. In such a way, Ethan spent the next several days lost in databases and stumbled upon evidence of a collateral situation purely by accident. There were multiple botnets in the same operational space in terms of information gathering. Some he could identify as North Korean. He knew which programs were his, but the X factor, it was a very strong X factor, either government level or the top of the private sector. He dug into the sort of companies operating in and around Vladivostok. He found something about a Dragon Tail club and then learned a little bit about a tech company that had similar iconography in Moscow. He didn't have to read much more to find the second quantum computer, Iskintel. VKD certainly wasn't shy about marketing their future capabilities with the QAI. When Ethan tried to crack that database, though, he had to say goodbye to his own rig. It literally went up in smoke, and somehow a shock came through the headphones, knocking him out of the chair. He had to run for a fire extinguisher. After the smoke settled, he was stunned about 10 minutes. Then the reality of it registered, and he selected several choice expletives to yell at the empty room. This meant he had to ditch another ranch house. Ethan let himself calm down before texting a message to Claire, who was a great help when he needed to relocate. It was also an excuse to spend some time with her. There was a silver lining, anyway. He left a message for Ricky as well. The message read, "There's another QAI out of Moscow, from what I can tell. It wants the same thing. That cube."